Hey everybody, it's Bruce here from WaterBear, and as always we are dedicated to you, the musician, helping you out on your journey, your career, taking you from where you are now to where you want to be. Now my career goes all the way back from the late 80s, early 90s, right the way through to today, where we do things very differently. We take the best from the past, we look to the future, and we make plans that work right now. So get involved in the comments, like and subscribe, and let's get going. So this video is all about how to rehearse your band project like a professional. And the end goal that we want to put on gigs that blow people's minds. And you must have experienced that. I'm sure you've had experience of plenty of gigs that didn't do that, that kind of just a bit average. And every now and then you go and see a show and it blows your mind, it changes your life forever. So how do we achieve that? Well, the answer is we prepare for it, we plan for it, and we make magic happen, and it starts in the rehearsal room. So let's get started with 3 tips to get you going. Tip number 1, understand the difference between pre-production and rehearsal for a live show. Pre-production is about nailing down every single part ready for recording in the studio. Rehearsal for a live show is different. Why is it different? Well, arrangements live are often very different to the arrangements in the studio. So we've got to understand that and think about what's going to work on the stage. So what that means practically is we've kind of got 2 different types of rehearsal depending where you are in the kind of campaign. So before the album, while you're writing songs, arranging, getting ready to record, I'd categorize that as pre-production. So there's lots of focus on individual parts, trying things out, trying different drum parts, and really nailing down the essential components of a great record. Live, that work's been done. So you would expect a professional band to not need that much rehearsal time because everybody's done the preparation. That isn't the time to be faddling around learning new parts. That's the time to be putting a set together. That's a different thing. So everybody comes super prepared and you look at the set holistically. Let's take now a hypothetical situation, a band who's just finished their first album, preparing for their first tour, probably a support tour. Now, early on in the band's career, they need more rehearsal than later on because experience tends to fast track this process. So if you're serious about being a great band, this could be rehearsing 3, 4, 5 times a week, even taking a solid week of your life out and nailing this down because there's an awful lot of detail that goes into a great live show. Now, when I was younger, I was very lucky because I was a full-time musician and we could take whole days to rehearse. These days, that's not always, and in fact, not often possible. So you've got to be super organized. You can do a lot of the preparation beforehand and make sure that if you've only got 1 or 2 rehearsals, you absolutely maximize that time. And that comes with being super prepared and having your stuff together before you get in the rehearsal room. And personally speaking, I wouldn't be able to work with musicians who turn up late, whose instruments aren't set up, ready to go, new strings, all that stuff, in tune, spare guitars, spare leads, spare cables, and with that kind of sense of work ethic, because my time's really, really important, so I can't spend it having a break every 20 minutes to go outside and drink a coffee or whatever. So it's a job of work. We've got a defined outcome, which is we've got to compete with an international level of amazing bands. That does not happen by accident. Tip number 2, look at the set holistically. It's not just a bunch of individual songs, you've rehearsed them. This is about putting those songs together in a coherent order. Now, not only that, every single second from when you start the intro tape to when you go off the stage, that's part of the show. So rehearse all the changeovers, all the gaps, think about the tempo, think of the dynamics, and think about the set as an entity in its own right. So other stuff you've got to think about are, what happens if something goes wrong? Have a rehearsed routine for technical difficulties such as leads, pedals, etc. going down. I suggest you make a list of everything that's part of a set that you might forget, and that includes guitar changeovers, changes of tunings, unusual instruments, costume changes, whatever it is, because it needs to be kind of planned and worked out. If you're using any kind of technology, and I'm talking about backing tracks, loops, samples, all that stuff, that needs to be super rehearsed because you're probably going to have a 15-minute changeover, so you've got to be able to plug in, go, check the line, and the thing has got to work, and that takes some preparation. So build that in to the formation of this set. And the reason we need to practice for when things go wrong with technology and all your backline is stuff does, even for the world's biggest bands. So it can't come as a surprise to us when suddenly our guitar goes off or the mic goes down. We've got to have something up our sleeve. And let me tell you a story. I was watching Blackstone Cherry headline a festival stage about 2 years ago. And I was watching from out front. I wasn't that familiar with the band, but I was really blown away by the set. It was properly amazing. It was relaxed, huge crowd participation. It was one of them bands where I discovered I knew all the songs even without realising it. And about 3/4 of the way through the set, I went backstage just to watch from the side of the stage, and I discovered that there'd been an incredible amount of technical problems. Amps had been going around left, right and centre, and they'd actually adapted the whole set to put an acoustic section in the middle while the roadies frantically fixed everything. And the amazing thing was, because there were such professionals, it was invisible from the front of the stage, and I just saw it as this amazing gig. And then when I saw backstage what they'd had to contend with in front of a headline audience with hired gear that basically didn't work, and yet they triumphantly taken a whole festival crowd of people with them on an amazing journey, and none of it mattered. That's the definition of a professional rock and roller, and it blew me away. Tip number 3 is leadership. Unfortunately, somebody has to be the MD. It's probably going to be falling to you because you're the person watching this. You're the person who cares enough to think about your band's career. Somebody's got to crack the whip. Unfortunately, you don't get a medal for it. Often you get a bit of grumbling and groaning, but it's got to be done. We've got to have some pace and energy because that's what makes things really good. And again, if it really comes down to it, you're approaching this as a professional. We're talking about professional music. If you've got people in your band who want it to be a hobby, that's fine, but they need to be in a hobby band. You need to work with like-minded professional people because it's the only way to get the job done. So this question crops up all the time in my inbox and when I'm talking to bands. It's what do I do with that band member who just doesn't get it? They're pretty talented, but they just will not treat it seriously and they think it'll all fall into place. And kind of it's not their fault. Maybe they've watched too many rock and roll films where the whole thing's glamorized and they've fallen for the kind of, you know, the mirage that we put around this stuff. So behind the scenes, it's completely different. Obviously, professional music is very competitive. Obviously, we've got to treat it like a business. And people who are naive enough not to get that, well, you can lead a horse to water and maybe you can spell it out once. You can spell it out twice, but the third time you're having to say the same thing, well, you probably have to say to yourself, do you know what? It's okay to go our separate ways. We don't have to fall out, but if this is important enough to you to be watching this and thinking about investing your future in it, you cannot be carrying people. You cannot take them with you. It's a hard part of the job, but those difficult conversations, unfortunately, do have to happen. Okay, everybody, so thank you very much for watching. I've got one last point, and that is when you walk off the stage, you might think the gig's over, but it's not, because you've got a huge opportunity to get out there into the crowd, onto the merch stand. You'll shift a whole load more merch if you're actually there. You'll get to meet all your fans, you'll sign all the stuff, and that's where you really consolidate that great work you've done on stage. And it doesn't end there. The gig only really finishes when every last comment on every social media post has been replied to, dealt with, commented on, shared. That's the end of the gig. So in the rehearsal room, we've got to figure out who's going to do what. The whole band needs to be on the merch stand. Who's going to take care of the socials? Who's going to take care of those fans who want a long conversation? Sometimes that's tough after a long gig, but it's super, super important that you take care of that. So work it out, plan it, lead it, off you go. So thank you for listening, everybody. I've been Bruce, you've been brilliant. Now don't forget, if music is becoming a very important part of your life, you can do this type of stuff with us at WaterBear. Day in, day out. You can do a degree, you can do a master's, you can study on site in the heart of Brighton or online. Just give us a call and we'll tell you all about it.